It's Monday here in Southern Ontario, and we've reached round 2 of the Stanley Cup postseason. This is the Sportsline Podcast on the CHCH and Parrot Media platform. Always appreciate you watching or listening. I'm Bubba O'Neil. You know, on the regular, this podcast highlights our region's many extraordinary athletes, coaches, executives, and broadcasters. But today, we're talking about the fever pitch, which is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, this individual's love for hockey dates back to 1975 as a high school student working in the media press box at Maple Leaf Gardens. Now, after getting to know those who turn the screws, waves were made in 1988 when Maple Leafs owner Harold Ballard named a 30-year-old Gord Stellick as Toronto's general manager, being the youngest GM in NHL history. Now, since the early 90s, Stellick remains and became one of the most knowledgeable and trusted and entertaining broadcasters in the country, spending decades at the Fan 590 and Rogers Sportsnet. Currently, he's an author, and of course, he's still on the air on the NHL Network and YouTube talking hockey. Gord, this is a long time overdue. So happy and pleased that you've joined us on the Sportsline Podcast. Thank you, and great to see you.
Well, my pleasure, Bubba. Like I said, CHCH and Sportsline, it was on Global, then CHCH and all that. It goes way back with me. So great to catch up with you again as well.
Well, you know, and I want to just ask you about this because I think about all the years back in the 80s when it was Leafs on 11. You were a part of that, weren't you?
Well, when I worked for the Leafs, they were on TV 11 as well, and then later on when they picked up the package again, I think it was 1995. So for 3 years, I was co-hosted with Paul Hendrick. I don't know if it was a contest. I was in the swimsuit round, and then he won, and he became Mr. America or something like that. But anyway, he suited the host role, and of course, he went on for a great run there. And I went on for a great run in other places, but I did enjoy my time with the crew. It was about a dozen games. I think they had each of those 3 years, and getting to know a lot of the CHCH gang that I'd watched or heard of behind the scenes.
Well, and I got to know you back in the days when I was at Sportsnet there, admiring your work with the hockey department and seeing all that you did there with that crazy hockey gang that you had there. There were some really good days there with some real good names.
Well, really are. You know, I've been fortunate to maybe I'm not good at any place that I've worked at all places, really. But, you know, I did some stuff at TSN. I was at the Score when it launched and really enjoyed my time at the Score. And then, of course, like you say, Sportsnet and, you know, all kinds of people here, there, everywhere. Darren Millard's in Vegas now. Darren Drager went over to TSN. Nick Kyprios has sort of been the one constant. You know, Scott Morrison. Just a lot of people. You know, a lot of different people, and it's been fun. Like you get to doing something you really enjoy. And yeah, Sportsnet was a new network, and we all, you know, at one time or another, we all kick ass and really enjoy and get on kind of a vibe and a groove. And for me, usually it evolves around covering hockey.
I always remember Waters. What a piece of work he was.
Oh, Bill Waters. You know, Bill Waters, so first of all, his wife, Natty, was our original babysitter. We lived on Davisville Avenue in Toronto, and her last name was Lisco. She lived 2 down. And then my dad was the TV repairman for North Toronto and Leaside. So he actually fixed Bill's TV before I got to know Bill professionally. So there's a lot of small world there with Bill Waters. And he was a master at the English language and what he said and how he used it. And another one of those great people I got to know.
Yeah, lots of battles with him and Kipper all the time at the desk. Always a lot of fun back in the day. Hey, let's talk about, before we get on to the Maple Leafs and what their journey is going to look like, and can we just talk about the Jets 4, Blues 3, double overtime? Your thoughts?
So first of all, I always talk about, you know, on NHL Network Radio about the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. To me, it's the very best time of the year. And I'm biased, but it seems, although there were some pretty good NBA playoffs, I got to say, this year, but usually the NHL just way more epic battles. There's a certain fiber, certain bite to it. You saw it in the first round. There was 8 series. No team got eliminated 4 straight. All 4 series in the West were tied 2-2 at one point. And then we were getting 4 games a night, which was great. And then we kind of lamented we're only getting 1 a night. And Friday wasn't very good. Winnipeg and St. Louis, Game 6. Saturday, oh my God, off the charts, Dallas and Colorado, Game 7. So thought we'd be talking about that today. It's still, what a great, great game. And then then, as if you could go any crazier, I mean, it's still unbelievable. That's the beauty of sports. That's why you watch sports. That's where you never know, a new storyline, something else can happen. That Winnipeg win over St. Louis, how they did it, Winnipeg in particular. Like, we're going to be talking today about Connor Hellebuck possibly being the story in a negative way, winning the Vezina Trophy and maybe winning the Hart Trophy, but then being the biggest failure in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So they've been able to park that and move on. But Bubba, that is a game for the ages. That is one that, you know, in the thousands of games that we talk about or what have you, we'll certainly remember. It will be an element of top of mind.
You know, let me tell you something. I watched that game with my mom last night. I went over for dinner, and she got right into it. And when Perfetti scored the tying goal, she screamed. Like it was, like it was, yeah. It was that insane to think with 1.6 seconds left. Like as you said. What the Jets, as you talking about their goaltender and their seasons that they've had in the past being one of the top seeds and getting knocked off in the first round, being constant disappointments, they were 1.6 seconds away from all of that.
Yeah. Oh no, you're right. I mean, oh man, it would have been so sad. And you know, you and I are fortunate to be in the business. I mean, if you want to say one of the downsides is. I'm not as good a fan as I used to be. I love being a fan. I wish I could go back to being, you know, that how you felt when you're 10, when you're 18, whatever. But there are moments when that does happen. And that was one of them. That's exactly that. My wife Lisa was watching in another room. She did the same thing. Like, it's, oh my God, I can't believe it. You know, and boy, Winnipeg had not had a Game 7 at home since 1977. They were in the WHA then. They weren't even in the NHL. And then that is the latest goal in regulation time ever to tie things up in a Game 7 in the NHL ever. Wow.
Unbelievable. Let me ask you this. Go back to Saturday. If you were in the handshake line as a member of the Colorado Avalanche, what would you have said to Mikko Rantanen?
USOB. You know, no, it's you know, it's again another of the great parts I find about hockey is that handshake line, and you saw the Shen brothers, you know, embracing, and Binnington and Hellebuck, and you know all that, and then and obviously, yeah, Bubba, I give Colorado credit. Chris McFarland, their general manager, like he made a tough business decision, just like Julian Brisebois in Tampa made a tough one about letting Steven Stamkos sign somewhere else. And they got a couple of great players in Natchez and Drury, and they basically said, look, you know, there's a certain figure Rantanen was looking at. He thought they were going to get there or whatever, and they made the decision. So I got a lot of respect for that, making tough decisions. But obviously, the sentiment about it, you could tell he really hasn't been whole since he left Carolina, I think, till that game on Saturday. You know, I think he's sort of been a guy like dead man walking to a degree that just he didn't know what hit him. And obviously, you know, particularly Landeskog and McKinnon and him and, you know, Makar and Taves and that, you know, they've got a great connection. So you saw that as well. That just added to kind of a storybook type story for Rantanen in what was just a fabulous, and we all expected to go 7 games, and it did, and it was a fabulous series.
It really was. So let's talk about the Maple Leafs here. Well, before we talk about the Panthers, we got to talk about the Battle of Ontario, your thoughts of it. 6 games. But I'll tell you, and I know you're a little bit of a Leaf backer here, but when Perron scored to make it 2-2 in Game 6 in the nation's capital, did you think the Leafs were going to fall apart?
So I am a Leaf fan. Okay, I admit that. I try to cover it all as 32 different teams. But yeah, I got no problem saying I'm a Leaf fan. I grew up that way. I got to work with the organization. The Battle of Ontario had not existed for 21 years, so it's nice to see it again because it really had not existed, you know, since they had those 4 playoffs in 5 years. To answer your question, I still had confidence, but I'd had that before. It had been misplaced, right? I still had confidence they were going to figure a way to win this series, but it was starting to get the heebie-jeebies. The noose was tightening, all the whatever cliches you want. So, yes, I will profess that I felt they would find a way to win. I give Ottawa full marks. I was really glad they won 1 game. I didn't want them swept in 4. Not thrilled they won 2 games because it made it a little bit, you had to sweat a little bit on a Toronto point of view. But it was a real good series. That's a great young team in Ottawa. And for the Maple Leafs now, there has been this assumption they should be by the first round many other times. This should not be the second time in 21 years they're in the second round of the playoffs.
Crazy to think that the number that's right beside your head, 67, and was the number 67, who ended up scoring the winning goal.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's exactly it. Of course, I know back then in the final game, it was George Armstrong's empty netter, and Jim Pappen got the, God rest his soul, both of them, the empty net goal. But this is where I like what Craig Berube has had that feel, and that's a lot of reason they brought him. And really, he's got a lot of great coaching experience, but it's the one year that stands out when he won a Stanley Cup with St. Louis in 2019. And he had that, whether you want to call it luck or sixth sense, that, yeah, I remember he had 15 forwards, and there's 12 forward spots, and he had a way of kind of mixing, say, Sammy Blais in for a couple of games, and in and out and whatever. And a lot of people thought Max Pacioretty would be out and Nick Robertson in, and he kind of doubled down on him and put him in a better spot, and he came through and was the difference maker. And that's, playoffs. In a perfect world, only team will win 16 games. And you got to find different ways to win the 16, and the unlikely particular players have to be a factor in some of those. And, good on Max Pacioretty in many ways, the human sense as well. He's battled so much injury stuff the last couple of years, but being that difference maker in the series deciding game.
After missing 37 games in the regular season, and yeah, you really had to feel good for him. And he talked about, he was pretty open in the fact that, that there were major disappointments. He felt, I guess, not a part of the team. And he talked about his family and God being his reasons for continuing and playing in hockey. In fact, even considering retirement. So what a great story that was for the first round. Okay, second round here. Here are the Florida Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champions, right up, going up against the Maple Leafs here in round 2. The Cats defeated the Leafs in 2023 in those playoffs in the second round in 5 games. 4 of them were 1-goal games, 2 in overtime. Does that mean anything right now? Everyone's kind of talking about, hey, well, that's what the Panthers did in the last time they met. Does that mean anything to you?
Well, hopefully it's a learning process, part of the learning process for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Because, Bubba, what you see is the playoffs are different, okay? Like, you cannot play 82 regular season games anywhere close to what's required to play up to 28 possible playoff games. It's a different animal. And it's one the Leafs haven't really corralled all that well in the past, and hopefully that Florida series 2 years ago was part of what it takes to win in the playoffs, not win in the regular season. I was surprised, Bubba, when I look back how close those games were, because what I remembered was Leafs beat Tampa Bay, then I could not believe they were flat the first 3 games. They had the first 2 games at home, and you thought the momentum of that first series win. No, it wasn't there. They didn't get it till games 4 and 5. Game 4, they won. Game 5 went to overtime, and they got eliminated. So I hope that's the difference maker about that team that Florida had learned ahead of them, and that's why Florida's the defending Stanley Cup champions, about what do you want to call it, playing the right way, playing the right playoff way, something the Leafs haven't mastered and hopefully can take to a better level this year after that first round win over Ottawa, because that's what it's going to take against Florida. Exactly the opposite. Not so much the 5 games, but those first 3 games in that series.
Toronto's power play operated at 35% against Ottawa, which I would say is very efficient, and especially in that first game. Florida's penalty kill is around 88%, so that's also very good. But they also took a lot of penalties in that Tampa series. In fact, 72 penalty minutes. Is that an advantage for Toronto?
Well, it could be because, they checked, not only did they win a series, but they checked a lot of the boxes, Bubba. One was, the power play had been brutal the last couple of years. They had not scored. Like last year against Boston, they didn't get more than 2 goals in only 1 of the 7 games. That's not going to cut it. They hadn't got defensemen scoring. They hadn't got depth scoring. So they got all those things going. And then they got the special teams, and then they got some, great goaltending as well, and good goaltending / great goaltending at times. So a lot of these things came together. It's a whole new series. So whatever happened in Ottawa is kind of out the window. You got to write a new narrative again. And these are the Stanley Cup champions. Like I had picked Tampa Bay. I was really impressed by Tampa Bay the last quarter of the season. But you see now Florida rested some players. They had some players hurt. They've been through this the last 2 years. They've gone to the Stanley Cup Finals. So you play as long as you can. It's a short summer. So they kind of were saying, don't worry. We're going to be fine. We're going to be there. We're going to make hay. We're wearing the belt, and someone's going to have to earn it. It's not going to slide off.
I'm with you on that. I took Tampa as well too, and then Florida just destroyed them. Really, really did almost.
Yeah.
And the fact that I guess you're right. Paul Maurice and the general manager there, they knew what they were doing, putting guys on LTIR and just resting guys, not playing guys, and then all of a sudden they just like, whoa, the Stanley Cup champs are back. Anthony Stolarz, Steven Lorentz, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, all lifted the Stanley Cup for the floor alongside the Florida Panthers last year, but now are members of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Is there anything to that maybe some state secrets that they might be able to, fess up to the Leafs coaching staff?
Well, with the pro scouting as well now, I don't think there's many stones unturned, but who knows? Like I can remember, even back in my day that, if you played and an individual had a lot of experience with the other team, there was, back a lot of little things, subtle things maybe that could be gleaned and could be positive. And that's kind of the way we're looking at it. I mentioned all these little incremental positives for the Leafs, like Austin Matthews being named captain. Is that a difference? Craig Berube as the coach playing a bit of a different style. Tanev and OEL coming over and those kind of guys. And the other part is I do think there is an intangible, and I know Pacioretty didn't win a Stanley Cup, but he experienced some winning going deeper in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think there's something to be said for that having a few of those kind of players that understand exactly, experience exactly what it takes to win those 16 playoff games. So again, we're hoping the sum of all that, if you're a Leaf fan, the sum of all that makes for a positive result, unlike what we've seen in, say, 21 years or so.
Is there any advantage in goal in this series?
I don't think so. Which is good because, Bobrovsky really has brought his game. Like initially when he was signed, you kind of thought, boy, $10 million. It wasn't money well spent when he initially came over, but he certainly has found his way. And all you want out of goaltending is, well, first to give you a chance to win. If you can steal a game and make a difference that way, that's a bonus. Wow. And generally, if you're going to go all the way, your goaltender does that at least once a series, okay, is the difference maker. But funny one is, Bubba, like there's 16 teams that played in the first round. I don't really see any big goaltending stories that were the deciding factors in a game. The biggest one is Connor Hellebuck, who was probably the 16th best goaltender. Just more of a negative one. So I think in all those series, you saw a good example that a goaltender didn't steal a series and a goaltender didn't cost you a series. And that's what the Leafs need to at least continue, that as long as Anthony Stolarz and or Joe Woll are in, that they're allowing you the chance to win the game.
Always in these kind of series, there's someone that steps up that maybe isn't the marquee player or they step forward. Can I just say something about John Tavares? I thought he was the best player in the Ottawa series. I really did. A little bit about this guy who, had the seat taken away from him, and we'll never know how he felt deep down about it. I mean, he said all the right things in the press conference and anytime he's been asked the question, but I think he's playing as well as I think I've ever seen him in terms of being a Maple Leaf.
Yeah, you're right, and I really commend him. And the captaincy change I don't mind in the sense that John Tavares is a pretty serious guy, and I have no idea how that how that was taken in the dressing room or not, because it's usually a group of leaders. It's not the one guy wearing the C, and he would remain one of those groups of leaders. But they just felt that they had to give Austin Matthews a chance for his personality and other things to be the guy. John Tavares, what a phenomenal season. I got so much admiration for him and respect for him, like you said. And that's another one again. Bubba, all those guys, I've kind of kidded before. Let's get some votes for the Conn Smythe Trophy as the MVP in the playoffs. I mean, you've had Mitch Marner, two-time first-team All-Star, Austin Matthews, winning the Hart Trophy. Let's get some Conn Smythe votes, whether it's Tavares or Matthews or Marner or Nylander. I mean, that's what they got to do, because that means you go deep in the playoffs.
Florida, from Ottawa to Florida from one Tkachuk to the next. What kind of problems can this Tkachuk cause in this series?
Well, the good news is if the Leafs win, they've run out of Tkachuks. Okay, so there would be no more after. They got that, man. They got that. But boy, the Four Nations face-off, that game, everyone just so they got a lot of what they are. This genuine personality, the feistiness, along being skilled, but. I think, a difference you look at in Ottawa, I really like where Ottawa's heading, Bubba, but I was kind of analyzing it that, so say 5 years ago, for argument's sake, Toronto Maple Leaf fans are going, okay, in 5 years' time, we're going to be better than the Boston Bruins and Tampa Bay Lightning. And 5 years later, you can say they are. But the Florida Panthers were in the rearview mirror, right? And all of a sudden, 5 years later, they passed you. And why did they pass you? Well, the Maple Leafs have the same core, except Zach Hyman's out and Matthew Nyes is in than 5 years ago. Florida, they drafted Ekblad and Barkov and, all that. But look at the trades. We mentioned Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Brandon Montour came in a trade. Carter Verhaeghe was signed as a free agent. Gustav Forsling was a waiver pickup from Carolina. So you're talking 6 roster moves. That's a staggering number, and they all contribute, to the Panther lineup. So when I talk about Tkachuk, so he is the primo one out there, but they made all those other kind of moves, say in the last 5 years, and that's how they passed the Toronto Maple Leafs and everybody else.
Okay, Gord, I hate to do this. The prediction game is ridiculous, but you got a winner for me.
So, the prediction game, man. The good part is I change them everything I go, so I'm right. I'll be not wrong 19 times, but I'll be right in the 20th. So I gotta stick with my belief in the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to say 6 games, even though that means they win in Florida. But why not? And and again, we're kind of looking the comparable. Craig Berube's the coach, and his St. Louis Blues caught lightning in a bottle. Like, every now and then a team will catch lightning in a bottle. And, why not the Toronto Maple Leafs? They've had more and more of their disappointments. So 4 down, 12 to go, but I'll keep it one round at a time. So I will take the Leafs in 6.
Fair. What about the Oilers and Knights? I mean, you talk about, I thought the Oilers were dead down 0-2 to LA. I mean, they did not look good. They make a goalie change to Calvin Pickard, and then they run off 4 straight. Wow.
So of the 8 postmortems today, the one that's the most depressing is the Los Angeles Kings. That's the most unfortunate. The other 7, varying degrees. Actually, some of them have some positives. I didn't know what to think of the Edmonton Oilers. I was trying to remember what I thought of them heading into the playoffs last year. Like, I couldn't really remember. And then, yes, they showed what they did to get to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. And Calvin Pickard was... That was based somewhat on merit. It'd be kind of like if the Leafs went to Joe Wall, they've got a 1A, 1B thing. It's not like Eric Comrie being the de facto backup for Connor Hellebuck. So in Pickard's case, he probably been their better goalie the last quarter of the season. So, good on them. They've always got that McDavid and Draisaitl factor, but the depth that had been eluding them during the course of the season really came through for Edmonton. And the LA Kings, who I never thought really had a depth problem, had a real depth problem in the playoffs. So that's a real unfortunate bitter pill for the LA Kings to swallow. But it's put the Oilers kind of back that you're thinking, yeah, these guys were the Western Conference champions last year. Why not? Well, Vegas Golden Knights were only the Stanley Cup champions 2 years ago. So, particularly out west, we got a lot of real heavyweight primo teams.
Okay, Stars and Jets, obviously, who have to be the 2 most emotionally driven teams right now. Now they got to square off against each other.
It's good for Winnipeg. They get an extra day off and they stay at home. They don't have to travel. I think that's a plus. That's a very tiring series. And right away, we always go to the injuries. And, geez, Josh Morrissey, it looked like his shoulder. Mark Scheifele, who knows what. And then meanwhile, you're hearing that both Heiskanen and Robertson could return to the Dallas lineup. So, that's, you would think, an advantage for Dallas. But I pick Winnipeg to win the Stanley Cup. And yeah, it'd be a nice story. Those fans really deserve it. That organization's really worked hard. So this is where, with or without, with injured players or not, they got to dig down. Their depth is their strength, and they got to play like they didn't play enough of over the 7 games. That it made it far too precarious how they played against the St. Louis Blues. And Connor Hellebuck, hopefully you've exercised those playoff demons, because we can't do another series like that. So hopefully that's in the back burner, and you're the Vezina Trophy, Connor Hellebuck. That's what we see from here on in.
Well, the demons hopefully will be erased by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Leafs Nation, I can just imagine the fever pitch that's going to be going on at Scotiabank Arena tonight and Maple Leaf Square. Even, I know we're not supposed to be cheering in the media booth, but obviously there's a certain amount of, I think, anticipation for the Maple Leafs to play well. This is going to be a lot of fun. Gord, thanks for joining us and giving us your perspective. Always so respected. And I just think we're in for, as you said, now we're down to, 8 teams, and boy, the race is on for the Stanley Cup. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Going to be a lot of fun. Like, fasten our seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but it'll be a lot of fun ride. And Bubba, great catching up with you as well. So you enjoy the hockey as well, okay, pal?
Appreciate your time, bud. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bubba.
All right, that's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. And, of course, right now at the NHL playoffs, that's what everyone's talking about. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, we do want to hear from you. Please hit that 5-star thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. If you have something to say, as always, we appreciate your comments, good or bad. And a reminder, be sure to check out our other podcasts like Morning Live and Trending Now. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.